Okay, we're back at the pod board, and I'm assuming, and you know what happens when we assume, okay, the old ass out of you and me thing. I'm assuming that up to this point, you know how to do simple genetic crosses, maybe incomplete dominance crosses, set up the alleles, the letters that go for each allele, stuff like that, okay, etc. Now this time we're going to talk a little bit about sex linkage. What that means, okay, is let's say we're looking for a trait that might be X linked. An X-linked trait. Now remember, review here. You have 23 pair of chromosomes, 22 normal autosomes, we call them, and basically one pair of sex chromosomes. Okay, to be a female, remember, you have either two X's to be a female. This is a female. To be a male, you have an X and a Y. So let's say we're talking about an X-linked gene. That means it's linked to the X chromosome. In other words, a female, since she has two X's that makes her a female, she could have two copies of that gene. A male only has one X. He also has a Y. If it's an X-linked trait, it can only be linked to the X that he has. So he can only have one copy of that gene. All right? The first thing we ever do when we set up a sex-linked cross in a Punnett square is we put, I'm going to use blue, an X and a Y at the top, representing our male, and an X on the side to represent our female. Now this time, what we're going to deal with here, okay, what we're going to deal with is red-green color blindness. It's linked to the X chromosome. Okay? It's linked to the X chromosome. Now you're going to notice we're going to have some different inheritance patterns here because of the sex linkage. So these will be things that you have to be looking for in a pedigree that we will do later and stuff like that. Okay? Now, basically what this means since it's X-linked. Okay?
Can I get Samuel J. Anderson
Since
and Laurel Lovelace
X
to the cafeteria ASAP?
Since it's X-linked, all right, we have basically some different options. All right? So for a normal child from a cross, or for a normal person, the different genotypes they can have will be constituted like this. I can have a female. I'm going to write down another female, and then two males. I'll show you why in a second. Okay. Now, for color blindness, let's use B. Big B is normal. Little b is recessive. Okay, so it's a recessive disorder. Being colorblind basically would mean that you need to have the little b, basically, genotype for the trait. Okay? A female, since she has two copies of X, she'll have two copies of the gene. So if she's normal, there are two possible genotypes for her. She could be X with a big B and another X with a big B. So basically like homozygous dominant. She could also be, X, big B, X, little b. And we call this, what we call this is she is carrying, she's a carrier. She's carrying the colorblind allele, but she has normal color vision. Okay, now, there is only one possible way to be a male with normal vision, because males only carry, basically they only have one copy of the gene. So a normal male has to be X, big B, Y. Okay? X, big B, Y. That would make him normal. That one copy of the allele that he gets makes him or breaks him. Okay? Now, to be colorblind, there's only one possibility for the female. Okay? There's really only one possibility because it's a recessive disorder. If it is a colorblind female, she must be X little b, X little b. If it is a colorblind male, he must be X little b, Y. Makes him or breaks him. Okay, so let's ask a question here. Let's say that we have a colorblind male. Okay, so a colorblind male, so he's XB little b, marries a normal female for vision. Okay, she's not colorblind. Now, there are two possibilities for the female. Okay, now let's say they have a son, and we know that they have a son who is colorblind. All right, so let's say this son down here, we know they have a son who is colorblind, so that must be his genotype. So we have to figure out basically what mom's genotype is to have a colorblind son. What you will notice here is all of these sons will inherit the Y from dad, but it doesn't carry any gene for colorblindness. Okay? Dad can give a colorblind allele, but only to his daughters. Okay? So the son here has to get that little b allele from mom. So she must be at least a carrier. Now we said she's normal, so she has to be heterozygous, but a carrier of that allele. Okay, we know they had a son who was colorblind, so that's basically what mom must be, genotypically. Okay, dad must be that because we said he is affected. Okay, so when we look at the daughters, okay, they have a probability of having daughters here who are carriers, but in this case, they also have the probability of having a daughter who is colorblind. So they could have daughters who are colorblind. They could also have sons who are normal. Okay, because mom is also giving a normal allele to half of their sons, we would expect. Okay, so colorblindness, there are different sort of modes of inheritance here. Okay, dad basically can give his allele to the daughters, but not his sons. Okay, mom can give her alleles to the sons, and dad can't if it's an X-linked trait. Okay, let's do one more. Let's pretend, okay, that we are working again with color blindness, whatever. All right, color blindness. And dad is normal. Mom is normal. Okay? And they have a colorblind son again. Okay? Now we look at this and we say, okay, dad's normal this time, so how does that really change things? Well, it changes things by saying, in this case, if dad is normal, okay, and mom is normal, well, in this case, the first probable daughter in the Punnett square would be big B, unaffected, okay, not a carrier. The second daughter would be X big B, X little b. So she would be a carrier, but a normal color vision daughter. So we start to see differences with this sex linkage. Okay, now they also still have the probability of having 50% of their sons be normal color vision. All right? So if I have a normal dad, normal mom, in a sex-linked trait that is recessive, they can't have an affected daughter. They can have some carrier daughters, okay? But they can't have an affected daughter. In fact, what if mom had color blindness? She's affected. Okay? She's affected. Dad is normal. This still changes things. They still can't have an affected daughter because dad is giving every daughter a big B. So all daughters in this case would be carriers, but none of them could be affected. So in a pedigree, if I saw something where you were thinking maybe it's X-linked, but you see an affected daughter and dad is normal, it can't happen that way. So it couldn't be a sex-linked trait. Okay? So we're just kind of showing you, look, if it's talking sex linkage, they follow different inheritance patterns. Last thing. What if we were talking about a Y-linked trait? Okay, Y-linked means it's only found on the Y chromosome. Correct? Okay, so if Dad was affected with a Y-linked trait, let's say it's Y with a big B, whatever. Okay, not only would he have to give it to some of his sons, he has to give it to every one of his sons if he's affected. Okay, every son gets a Y from Dad. That's what makes them a son. They get the Y from their father. And so if it's an affected trait, they got that on the Y chromosome from their dad. And every son would have it. So if we saw a son that was unaffected, possibility if Dad's affected, it's the milkman's kid or the UPS guy. So might have to go on Maury Povich and do the whole, bring the envelope in and slide it down with the tension and find out if it's Dad's kid or not. That could have to happen, okay? So that's sex linkage in a nutshell. Later we'll talk pedigrees, okay? Later.